Previously on Dead Man Walking. For the first time in his life, he was alone. One day, Tobias met a fellow called Malcolm Graves. He immediately recognized the talent in Malcolm, and so he joined forces with him. Everything went wrong during a heist where Tobias seemingly betrayed Malcolm as he escaped while Malcolm was captured and imprisoned for life. He threw away his old name to accept his new one, Twisted Fate. A single ring from his finger was worth more than a man would ever see in his life. The pistols fired with deafening roars. Years passed and Twisted Fate found himself in Bilgewater. Why was he there? Money, of course. He snapped a card from his sleeve and he waved it through his fingers. In a blink of an eye, he found himself inside the warehouse. It's been a long time. I've been here for hours. Some folks might get bored standing still this long, but I've got anger to keep me company. I ain't leaving this spot until I settle the score. Long after midnight, the snake finally shows. He suddenly appears in the warehouse using the same old magic trick. I prime my shotgun, ready to turn him inside out. After years spending looking for the treacherous son of a bitch, here he is, dead to rights at the end of Destiny's barrels. TF, it's been a long time. Even in situation like this, somehow, Twisted Fate's face showed nothing. No fear, no regret, no hint of surprise. "Malcolm, how long have you been standing here?" said Twisted Fate. The smile in his voice enraged Graves. Graves could pull the trigger and leave Twisted Fate dead, but he didn't want to do it, not yet. Graves still had few questions. "Why would you do it?" said Graves, knowing that he'll come back with something clever. "Is the gun really necessary? I thought we were friends." The word friends ignited even bigger fire inside Graves. "You're looking as dapper as ever. Tell me why you left me to take the fall, or they'll be picking bits of your pretty face out of the rafters," replied Graves. 10 damn years in the locker, you know what that does to a man? Of course, Twisted Fate didn't. For once, he had nothing to say. He knew he did Graves wrong. "They did things to me that would have driven most men mad. All that kept me from breaking was my anger. And thinking about this moment right here." Twisted Fate finally came up with a clever reply. "Sounds like I kept you alive. Maybe you should thank me." This just added more fuel to the fire. Graves was mad. He could barely see. And that was Twisted Fate's plan. The moment Graves is blinded with rage, Twisted Fate would simply disappear. But Graves knew him far too well. He took a deep breath and he calmed himself down, at least a little bit. "How much did they pay you to sell me out?" said Graves. TF stood still, smiling. He was just trying to buy some time. "Malcolm, I'll be happy to have this conversation with you, but this really isn't a good time or place." Almost too late, Graves noticed a card dancing through TF's fingers. He snapped out of it and he squeezed the trigger. "Idiot," said TF. "You just woke up the whole damn island. You know whose place this is?" Graves didn't care. He stood ready for a second shot. Then cards exploded all around them. Graves blindly fired back. Then all of a sudden, the door got kicked open. Just to spice everything up, a dozen pirates and thugs came roaring in. "So, do you really want to do this?" TF asked, with more cards ready in his hand. Without a word, Graves nodded. He didn't care about all the pirates crawling around. Twisted Fate was his only target. Another shot came out. A box exploded where TF was just a fraction of a second earlier. "I do believe my old partner is trying to kill me." TF whipped 3 cards back in Graves' direction and then quickly ducked into cover. He started looking for a way out. Graves cursed loudly, but the cards wouldn't do much to him. "You ain't getting away, TF. Not this time." TF continued to jump from cover to cover. but Graves followed him, shooting as fast as he could reload. But TF realized that Graves is not his only problem. The pirates were all around and they were smart enough to leave some men guarding the doors. Not only that, but he wasn't willing to leave without what he came for. TF noticed few men guarding the box with his treasure. He pulled out a red card. Explosion went off. This time it was his work. With all the pirates down, he took what was inside the box. A golden dagger. With every possible way out blocked, he ran to the only quiet corner in the warehouse. A card was dancing in his hand as he prepared to shift. But as he started drifting away, Graves appeared. Graves was staring at the glowing card in TF's hand. He knew what was coming. He quickly tried to hit TF with the smoking barrels of his gun. This forced TF to move and interrupt his concentration. "Can't run forever," shouted Graves. Among the dozen other thoughts in TF's head, there was the feeling that this was all set up. He got thrown an easy job out of nowhere, a big score just when he needed it most. And surprise, there was his old partner just standing there waiting for him. He realized that someone a lot smarter than Graves was behind this. 2 more shots from Graves' gun sent TF running again. He took cover behind another dusty wooden crate. "No way out, sunshine," Graves yelled. TF looked around to see fire from the explosions spreading to the roof. "We've been sold out, Graves," TF shouted. "You'd know all about that," Graves replied. "We work together, we can get out of this." "I must be desperate," TF said to himself. "I'd see us both dead before I trust you again." That's exactly the reply TF expected. Graves' anger finally bought him enough time to shift outside. He could only hear Graves roaring inside after he realized what happened. TF felt bad for a moment about leaving Graves in a burning building. Suddenly, an explosion went off, blowing out the side of the warehouse. Graves stepped through the hole. TF tipped his head and started running. Graves followed him with more shots. I have to admire the man's determination. I hope it won't kill me tonight. Meanwhile, on the other side of Bilgewater, aboard the enormous warship called Deadpool. The first mate was leading a small boy to the captain of the ship. They could hear tortured screams coming from the captain's quarters. Right before the door, they stopped. "Steady," said the first mate. "The captain will want to hear what you've got to say." And with that, they went through the door. The captain was a big man, with rolled up sleeves, facing back to the boy. The boy shivered when he realized that the captain's forearms were covered in blood. "Captain, I figured you would want to hear this," said the first mate. The captain said nothing and continued his work. The mate nudged the boy forward. The boy's breath quickened as he got close to the captain. He finally saw what he was working on. There was a man tied up on his workbench. His leg was cut open. The captain turned to the boy. It was Gangplank. He was holding a small knife gently between his fingers, just like a paintbrush. "It's a dying art, Scrimshaw," said Gangplank, his attention returning to the work. "Few have patience for carving bones these days. It takes time, see? Every cut has its purpose." Somehow the man was still alive. The carving upon the bone was beautiful. Coiling tentacles and waves. That made it even more terrible. The man sobbed. "Please," he moaned. Gangplank ignored his plea. He splashed a cup of cheap whiskey over his work to wash off the blood. The man screamed as he slipped into unconsciousness. "Remember this, boy," Gangplank said. "Sometimes even those who are loyal forget their place. Sometimes it's necessary to remind them. Real power is all about how people see you. Look weak for a moment and you're done. Now, what did you want to tell me?" A man," said the boy. "A man on the Red Town docks." "Go on," Gangplank said. He was trying not to be seen by the hooks, but I seen him. Gangplank muttered as he began to lose interest. He turned back to his work. Keep going, lad, the first mate urged. He was playing around with some fancy deck of cards. They glowed funny. Gangplank stood up from the chair like a colossus rising from the depth. Tell me where, he said. By the warehouse, the big one near the sheds. Gangplank put on his greatcoat and claimed his hat. Give the boy a silver serpent and a hot meal. And get everyone to the docks. We've got work to do. Back at the docks, the story continued. TF was running for his life at this point. He was trying to get his escape card working, but Graves knew how that works, so he kept chasing him. The pirates tried to block TF's way, but couple of exploding cards blew everyone to the sides. Graves is a fast runner for a big man, and so, with every pack of pirates, he was getting closer and closer to TF. To slow him down, TF threw an exploding card at Graves, but he managed to shoot it in the air. The explosion knocked both of them on the ground. TF quickly got back on his feet and he continued his escape. A small group of pirates tried to ambush them. That was the last drop for Graves. His shots blew their insides out their backs. More shots went off. One lost his leg, another one lost his head. After the job was done, the chase continued. TF was heading towards the only way off this island, the Butcher's Bridge. After some time, Graves finally arrived there. TF was standing still in the middle of the bridge. At first, Graves wasn't sure what was going on. He thought that TF gave up. Then he saw the mass of sword-wielding thugs in his way. TF turned around to find Graves behind him. He was trapped. He looked over to the side of the bridge. It seemed like he was thinking about jumping into the water. Graves knew he won't. He was out of options, and so he started walking towards Graves. Look, Malcolm, neither of us needs to die here. As soon as we get out of this, you'll run again. That's all you've ever done. TF didn't answer. Suddenly, he wasn't so worried about Graves. A horde of pirates from the docks appeared behind Graves. Gangplank called his boys from across the city to keep going death's sentence. But living wasn't the most important thing to Graves today. And this is where the second part of this story ends. What started as a story about two former partners may end up being something much bigger. I hope you enjoyed this part. As always, feel free to give me all your feedback, comments and likes. And as always, thank you, come again. So yeah, for all of those that didn't read the story, there is still a lot of story to go. I hope you are not upset that I cut it into about 10 minutes of footage, but it seems like if videos are above 10 minutes, people just lose interest. So there will be probably 2 or even more parts of the story. So don't worry, there is still more coming. So as always, thank you for staying here.